In this episode, Golden and I discuss the 1980 cult classic, Hawk the Slayer. Full speed ahead.
The Omega Beam. Full power.
Welcome to the Omega Beam number 129. I'm your host, Oren Merton. We love a good cult classic around here, and Amazon Prime Video is streaming one of my favorites, 1980s sword and sorcery adventure movie, Hawk the Slayer. I've seen it numerous times. Golden hadn't seen it, so this was the perfect opportunity to expose her to some good old fantasy fun. So this movie is about 41 years old, which means we felt a bit freer to go into spoilers, so this isn't going to be quite as spoiler-free as some of our episodes, but let's be honest, the joy of watching a cult classic isn't usually in the surprise unfolding of the story, so I think even if you haven't seen it, go ahead and listen. It's not going to detract. With that said, let's get into it. I am here with Golden to talk about one of my picks for us to watch, the now cult classic 1980s sword and sorcery film, Hawk the Slayer. I hesitate to call it a work of art, but it's definitely a work of something.
It does have works of art in it.
It has works of art in it, definitely. Full disclosure, I first saw this movie on TV in the very early 80s when I was a child. And as a child, you don't really have a concept of low budget or hamming it up or things like that. You sort of tend to take things as they are. There were some elements that even to a kid were pretty clearly a little off compared to other movies, like just taking the same identical footage of an arrow being shot and just repeating it rapid fire 3-4 times in a row.
I've got to say, as a D&D player, I would very much like that repeating bow.
Yeah, he gets...
Or the repeating crossbow. I mean, that is really impressive, being able to use that repeating crossbow one-handed. Because he has
absolutely.
The character has no fingers on one hand, and he's able to load and repeat fire so rapidly.
He's just really good. So even as a kid, you kind of got this idea that maybe this wasn't on the same level as, say, Star Wars, which had come out a couple years before this movie was made.
And this is the same year as Flash Gordon.
Right. Another cult classic sci-fi fantasy movie.
Please do not confuse the character Voltan in this movie with the character Voltan with a U.
Right.
In Flash Gordon.
Yeah, I'm sure they were not made with awareness of what the others were doing. Though I'm betting that the creators of this, because they just love the genre, they probably knew Voltan from the comics, the original 1930s comics. But even back then, as much as I loved it as a sort of quote-unquote serious fantasy movie, I knew it wasn't quite up to snuff, but I just didn't care. And I really think that this review I read on Rotten Tomatoes really sums it up. And I quote, "Oh baby, it is so bad it circumnavigates the scale and comes back to good again." And having watched it later in subsequent years, I've watched it a number of times. It's one of those movies that it's so bad that it is good, because it seems to be sort of self-aware of itself as high camp.
And let's just say there will be spoilers, because in order to really go into detail of why this is probably a cult classic at this point, we're going to have to talk about some of those. So let's talk about low-budget special effects. It first opens with this square jacuzzi type thing with gargoyles peering over it that is bubbling with this mist flowing out of it, and it's purple and it's glowy, and then it's in a room that's all gold. There's like a song, in the white room with...
Right, White Room by Cream.
In the
gold room.
In the gold room with no curtains. Yeah, it's definitely, and I mean, not even 5 minutes in, I was wondering if was it Mystery Science
Theater 3000, yeah.
I bet maybe we should just record the audio of my commentary having watched this for the first time, because it was just very entertaining. I mean,
Yeah, interesting.
you have the stone will now glow. I mean, it's special effects. There is a neon hula hoop transporter. Please step inside the neon hula hoop transporter so that I can then send you across to find others and bring them back.
It is. Some of those effects are beautiful. You know, the Hawk has the sword that has this glowy mind gem at the bottom of the hilt, and it's a closed fist with the stone in it. And in that beginning segment that you already talked about, the stone is it just sort of moves itself from one end of the room into this sword. And it's just so obvious by the shape of the fact that the hilt has this very, very thin wrist, and yet the hand that grabs this gem is just this standard normal man's hand.
Oh, it might have been a woman's.
It might have been a woman's hand.
Yeah.
But it was just, I mean, they don't even try. But part of it is also, I did read that the original budget for Hawk the Slayer, which it was probably greenlit in 1978 and filmed in 79, its budget was £61,000. So to put that in perspective, Star Wars, which had been a couple years before that, had a budget of $20 million. So you really want to do effects right. You needed a budget in the millions of dollars, and the budget of this was £61,000. To put that in modern terms, that would be a budget of around $330,000 today, and a movie that came out just a year or two ago, which was crowdfunded on Indiegogo, called Code 8, which was a total indie, low-budget sci-fi movie done by the Amell cousins, Robbie Amell, Stephen Amell. Very good movie on Netflix. Netflix loved it so much, they greenlit a sequel on their own. That had a budget of around $14 million.
Well, let's just go back to Flash Gordon. Same year.
Yeah.
It came out the same year. Flash Gordon's budget was 20 to 27 million.
Right. So that's what you needed.
Extremely less, and you've got to just, some of the effects are, I mean, how I don't know how I did not foresee this silly string blowgun.
That was amazing. I mean, who seriously comes up with that we're going to have the witch throw silly string on a character, and that's going to be the magic.
And then it's followed up by glowing neon ping pong ball storm.
Exactly. And the snow blower also. I mean,
and it's snowing in the church.
It's snowing in the church because magic.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, you got to give these people credit for having a no-budget film and just stretching it as far as they could. And it wouldn't surprise me if of the £61,000, $60,000 of it went into Jack Palance's salary, because he was a known Hollywood actor, and he couldn't have been cheap, whereas everyone else was more or less unknown at the time.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't... Yeah, you have the lady that played Magenta in Hollywood.
Character actresses and actors.
You have the lady that played Magenta in Rocky Horror Picture Show. So, and apparently she was burned by some flash powder when stirring a cauldron. So there aren't a lot of big names. There are a lot of definitely character actors. I liked her role best. Mm-hmm. And costuming wise, I think that the women, with the exception of Elaine, had the best costuming. I mean, I loved the costumes for the nuns. I loved the lady or the woman / witch. I liked her costume. But the guys were definitely a little lacking. I mean, let's just dress the elf in some orange and have him run through an autumn forest so it looks kind of like he's camouflage. And speaking of special effects, and here's where they definitely rolled a 20, there's one scene where the elf just jumps straight up onto a branch.
Yeah.
Silently and quietly. He definitely rolled 20s for both of those. For both his stealth and athletics or acrobatics to get up on that. It was, that was just beautifully. And it was just very quietly and subtly done.
Yeah, speaking of the elf, who I like to affectionately call the robot elf, because apparently to make him seem less human, the direction was show zero emotion at any point whatsoever, and including just vocalizing things, talk as flatly and as much like a robot as you can.
But yet there was an artistic side to him. I mean, he's sitting there, he's putting the tips on his arrows. At one point, he's arranged his arrows in this fan on the table inside the church. So there's definitely this artistic side that's coming out, but it's just not very overt.
Yeah, just not in the acting. And speaking of the acting, a lot of the acting was relatively flat, but the other extreme was, absolute over-the-top scenery munching. I think the direction given to Jack Palance was, hey, we hired you because we like Jack Palance, the villain in all these westerns and things. So why don't you just play Jack Palance, but turn it up to 20, please?
And speaking of westerns, for a good portion of the movie, the music is what you would call techno.
Right.
A little bit of techno. And then every now and again, there's this splash of spaghetti western.
Right. Clearly, one of the big influences was Sergio Leone and his spaghetti westerns, and there's a lot of like camera work, which is just the eyes,
Cue dramatic music,
right? And you'd get like the generally 80s disco dance soundtrack would suddenly get that whistle sound, from those movies. But like I said, there's a kind of self-awareness of what they were dealing with. And I think, there's probably been a lot of essays written about what's the difference between a cult classic and a movie that's just bad. And I think one of the things that elevates this one is an awareness of what they're dealing with, but at the same time, an actual love for the story.
There's one point towards the end of the movie that I'd swear that one of the guys gets knocked over the head, and it's that tweeting bird noise that you usually hear in cartoons. I was like, should I back that up and see if that's really what I heard? But yeah, it's just, okay, let's cue some dramatic music. Okay, let's do this. It's really very entertaining in terms of that.
Right.
Because you could sit there with a group of people that have never seen this and just see if you can guess what's going to happen and how bad it's going to be.
Right. And
don't let them listen to this first, though.
And at the same time, as bad as it is, that the creators, they loved this story and they took it really seriously. I unironically believe that Hawk the Slayer, just as a name for a character, is fantastic. And when you look at just the things that they sort of barely touch on, the Hawk frees slavers. I mean, the whole reason they have this sorceress on their side is she was being unjustly...
Yes, I will threaten to burn the witch, and then before I fight you, I will toss the torch to the side instead of on the pyre.
Well, they needed the witch, so they had to do something stupid, so she lived.
But it would have been more dramatic for it to be on the fire and she's starting to burn. Well, then again, she might have filmed the scene with she already got burnt by the cauldron.
Right, I was going to say.
Beforehand, it was like, no, that torch is not coming near me.
Right, in a no-budget movie.
We don't have the budget.
Right, in a no-budget movie. I mean, I'm sure there were no safety people in this film, and they were just trying to do their best.
Well, yeah, apparently, and you're talking about Jack Palance, apparently, according to the trivia on IMDb, he was actually injured in one of the scenes and continued to film the scene. The director came over and checked with him, say, are you okay? He's like, yeah, it's fine, let's continue with the shoot.
Yeah, I'm sure that the people on this movie had just a wonderful time. There was probably just wonderful...
Let's cut away to a love scene now.
Right. There's probably just a wonderful sense of camaraderie and all the overacting.
We're thick in the drama right now. It's a fight scene. Well, let's cut away to a love scene now.
Sure. Absolutely. Because, add to the drama.
I mean, there was some really... I enjoyed how the dwarf wanting the giant's food kept kind of tricking him into, okay, this is how I'm going to get the food. Now this is how I'm going to keep him from eating my food.
Right.
And in the end, there's the bonding over the food, which
Right.
is very well done. And I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and for as silly as this movie was, it did have stakes in the sense that
and
of the party,
the
they
matte
don't all make it.
paintings- The matte paintings that they used for the backgrounds just were seamlessly done in terms of the character going into it.
Right.
And they're beautiful. I mean, I would put some of those matte paintings on my wall. They're just gorgeous.
Sure, it's like it really felt like the budget they didn't put into getting Jack Palance, they put into the art. They put into the matte paintings and the background art. And again, that takes a movie that is just a low budget, in a sense, cheesy sword and sorcery movie, but these things are why it survived, because there's enough in there that you can latch onto as enjoyable.
It'd be interesting to see it redone with an actual budget.
It wouldn't,
I think the story would have to be retooled a little bit.
Well, this is a very short movie. It's a 90-minute movie, and I'm sure it's because they didn't have the budget. I mean, they probably couldn't, they barely had enough money to do what they did. I'm sure they didn't have the budget to take it to full 2 hours. But yeah, if I could imagine someone who just enjoyed this world taking the IP and getting an actual $50 million budget from Netflix or something, because they're putting hundreds of millions of dollars into things now. I could easily, or it's on Amazon Prime. It streams for free on Amazon Prime. You have Amazon Prime, do yourself a favor, have 90 minutes of fun and watch the movie. It would not surprise me if Amazon Prime just sees that there's enough viewers of this over a year or two that they just say, you know what? Here's $20 million. Remake it with a modern CGI budget, and let's see where it can go. With the idea, because one of the things, if you read the Wikipedia, there was thought of a sequel. There was thought of a TV series out of this. And Amazon Prime, they're doing the Lord of the Rings, and they put like $500 million into it. This would be like less. The budget for a Hawk the Slayer series or a Hawk the Slayer reboot would be less than a single episode
of some of the other.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me if the viewership is enough, because I think I noticed that it had like 500 and some user reviews, and it had a 4.5 out of 5, because the people who see this movie, they love it.
They're watching it knowing that this is bad. I mean, you have, I'm going to slice you across the midsection with this sword, and it is going to kill you. And clearly it's not. But you have to just go with it. And apparently the swords were sharp, because we found that out from that trivia from Jack Palance.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in this that is laughable, but it's not laughable in the way of, oh my God, I can't believe they did this.
You gotta love Jack Palance's eyes as the glowing sword goes to the main character's hand. I mean, they go into the hunchbacks, and the first thing he says is, I'm going to need your help to get the gold out of your boat or barge or whatever. Clearly, you do not need his help. The giant was able to carry the chest with one hand.
Right. But, it's just done with... It's not tongue-in-cheek, but it's done with a wink.
And here's where the writing could just improve very simply. I mean, you have Jack Palance holding a sword to the abbess's chest. If you do not leave now, I'm going to slit her throat. The sword is not at her throat.
Right.
Or later on, you have one of his men holding the sword up to the giant's plate mail. If you don't do what I say right now, we're going to skewer him through the heart. He's wearing plate mail.
Right. Maybe try one of the unarmored.
So the writing could easily be retooled in some places.
Sure.
Have it be a little bit better. I mean, they bring back the one guy, and Jack Palance just points to the table, which just looks like a picnic table that you'd find at the park.
It probably was.
Yeah.
I mean, they may have just found a wooded area in the UK where there happened to be a bench, and so they just said that it's already here.
Yeah,
let's use it.
The heroes have horses or a donkey or mule for the dwarf.
The dwarf is a donkey.
The bad guys are running through the forest, and before that, they're running through the forest.
Right.
Jack Palance's character, Voltan,
They probably could only afford very few horses.
is like, I own everything. And there are clearly horses right there that he could have probably procured for his men.
Right.
But they're probably the same horses that were used in the previous scene.
Sure. I'm guessing they probably could afford to rent like 3 horses or something, and so they gave them to the heroes, and then just when a villain needed a horse, they just used that horse again.
We are the heroes. Let us go to the camp and even the odds by killing a whole bunch of the men.
Right.
We go to the camp. We kill a whole bunch of the men. Oh, look, there are still that many men when they come to the church.
Well,
he got a lot more men very quickly.
He's a very, very
had backup
effective.
men.
He's a very effective recruiter, really. He offers dental, and back then that was a big deal. So they were very happy to join
And
his
you know
crew.
that one of the nuns really she really believes him when he says, if you do this, I will let the abbess live. I will let her live if you do this. Okay, great. And so you know that she's going to betray them.
And die. You know she's going to die because.
But seriously, I thought she was going to drug the food.
But then she couldn't have brought out the test tube.
So she uses the test tube, she drugs the ale and gives it to the giant, and then she stands there just quietly waiting so that she can catch the cup and it doesn't make a sound when it falls. That was cool. That was neat.
The question is, does it bear repeated watching? Now, I'm someone who's seen it half a dozen times, so I would definitely say yes. If you like camp, then definitely this is something that can just put a smile on your face because it's pretty campy.
Jack Palance's character tells Hawk that he has to drop his sword. Then he has to remove his vestments, and I'm thinking, is he asking him to strip before he tries to kill him?
Right. Well, it was a very odd brotherly relationship.
And then he tells him to pray to your God. If you grew up together and this is your brother, wouldn't you know what God he worships?
Well, the kind of family relationship.
Okay, that's enough time for worship. We need to move on now.
But that was because he saw the necklace that was from the girl that married Hawk that he had a thing for and all the rest. And it's interesting because looking forward, back in the late 70s, the whole idea that Hawk is marrying this woman that loves him, and that Voltan, his brother and the villain, says, "You are mine," and she's like, "No, I wasn't. I was just your friend." Yeah, you didn't have anything on her. It's not like your brother stole her from you. She was her own person, and she never really wanted to be with you for a minute.
I wonder if the people that made Lady Hawk saw this movie and said, okay, this is what we're not going to do, and this is what we're going to do. And Lady Hawk is one where I love the music with the movie, but without the movie, it doesn't hold.
You'd almost think, well, Lady Hawk also had a real budget, so it's like I wonder if
the music
Hawk
really
had a budget.
It should have been different music. It is a techno kind of, but it matches what's going on. And at one point we were watching this and you're like, yeah, the music doesn't really match the scene in terms of the move. But Lady Hawk, the music does move with the characters and with the scene.
I think to some degree that may have very well been budget because, having done like a super duper indie student type film in the past, having scored it, there was nothing filmed. I didn't have a script. And I was just told, okay, give me music for a scene like this. Give me music for a scene like this.
Yeah, maybe.
And I had no idea what was going on. So the guy might have said, okay, we're going to need riding music. We're going to need combat music.
We're going to need suspenseful music.
Right, we're going to need a love flashback
That's very
music.
true. I mean, this is a movie that is bad, but you love anyway.
Yeah.
And high on my list of movies that are probably really bad, but I love anyway and they make me laugh, you still have not seen.
Is Your Highness?
Yeah.
That was actually had a multi-million-dollar budget, though. That was like a serious film.
But it is still, It is one of those movies that you know it's just bad, but you love it anyway.
Okay.
And you know the jokes are infantile, and you love it anyway. And it's just like, okay, yeah, they went there. And in some ways, it kind of reminds me of Hawk the Slayer in terms of some of its special effects and things.
Yeah, except I think Hawk, it's written to sound as if it is high fantasy, Lord of the Rings, very, very serious epic stuff. But it's filmed knowing that the budget was £61,000 and that they're not going to achieve it. So they pretty much decided, okay, we want to make deep, serious fantasy. We don't have the budget. It's going to be obvious on screen we don't have the budget. So let's just lean into it. And I think that's what makes it a cult classic, and that's what makes it watchable. They're not trying to pretend that this was at the time, $30 million budget movie, that they know what it is, and they're just trying to enjoy it and give you something you'll like.
Like I said, I really wish we could have done like an entire watch through and just recorded my audio of comments that I was making during the movie.
Yeah, Riff Tracks, which is the post Mystery Science Theater 3000 web show that those same people do, they do have one of Hawk the Slayer. And in fact, you can buy their video on demand of Hawk the Slayer with their satirical comedy. And I think I own it. I think it's somewhere on one of my hard drives. So yeah, this movie is absolutely ripe for laughing at it and laughing with it. I mean, you can tell that they were enjoying it as they were making fun of it, because it's that kind of movie. So yeah, if you are someone who either takes your fantasy so seriously that you can't enjoy when it's not done to par, you will not like this movie. If you absolutely hate fantasy, this is not going to make you love it. But if you enjoy cult classics, if you enjoy, I don't want to say bad movies, but movies that
don't have the budget and tried hard anyway.
Right. And if you do enjoy fantasy and are able to laugh at it, then I think you're really going to enjoy this movie, like so many people do. I mean, for a movie to become a cult classic, it means a lot of people really enjoy it, even if it failed initially. And this is that kind of movie. Well, thank you, Golden.
You're welcome.
And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/129. If you like this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. It's those reviews that let people who like this stuff find our podcast. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. Full stop.